Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, March 4th, 2019, and today we're going to be looking at a 2020 election prediction between John Hickenlooper, the former governor of the state of Colorado, versus, of course, the incumbent president, Donald Trump. This one took me by a surprise. Today he announced that he will be running for president of the United States in the year 2020, and I do think that is an interesting development. There was a big discussion about a Kasich Hickenlooper run back in late 2017, early 2018, amounted to nothing, but now Hickenlooper is actually running for president, and there is a possibility he chooses Kasich as his vice presidential candidate, but again, that's only if he does win the nomination. And looking at someone like John Hickenlooper, he comes from a state like Colorado. Obviously, we know that one is going to go into his column, but it's just more than that as well. John Hickenlooper, he's not really known too well nationwide. He only comes up in some bipartisan ideas on the mainstream media, very rarely, but he is a different type of candidate, to say the least. We're looking at a candidate like Donald Trump as well, who's going up for re-election. And as we start off with this map, we typically start out with all the Trump states, and then we go into the Democratic states. Same thing here, but it's just going to be pretty interesting. It is the beginning of the month, so I will be doing my Bernie, Biden, Warren videos tomorrow. If I am able to finish all of them by tomorrow. I'm probably going to do just Hickenlooper today, and then actually Sanders tomorrow, then Biden the next day, and then Warren the next day. But again, I also need ideas for future videos. 2020, even though it is coming up really soon, I'd also like to focus a little bit on possibly 2019 elections, discussing Democratic primaries. I may go ahead and do another Democratic primary map. I still need to work out for the math for those. Those take a really long time to figure out. I promise you that. And also with all the new superdelegate rules, you have to keep that in mind as well. But again, enough about that. Let's go ahead and start with this Donald Trump, John Hickenlooper video. Also, one thing, if you notice the background, it's a little bit lighter. I'm going to try to do the 270 to win theme if you guys like it or not. Wasn't exactly the favorite before, just something new to spice things up a little bit. I'll probably revert back to the light, the light theme in the next video if this one isn't pleasurable to the eye, but we're going to go ahead and characterize all the safe Donald Trump states. One thing I do like about this map is it does make the colors look a lot more pronounced than on a darker background, and it also is the exact replication of the 270 colors. But right now we know that these states are all going to go to President Donald Trump in the year 2020, I believe. Yes, Nebraska's 2nd district we do need to hold on to. John Hickenlooper obviously has some states into his column. We know that these are going to be California, Oregon, Washington, Hawaii. New Mexico is probably going to be a safe state, especially with a candidate that comes from coming from that area. New Mexico also already a likely state for the Democratic Party. That one is probably going to go into the safe column for Hickenlooper. Colorado would also characterize, that one probably is going to be a likely state. It's going to be the first likely that we're going to characterize now, but it's going to be pretty high up there for Hickenlooper. But we're going to go characterize all the safe states right now, and then I'll read off the amount of safe states that we have in a minute. I believe that could be it. Maine's 1st district would be safe as of right now. 188 electoral votes for Hickenlooper in the safe column, 9 in the likely column already. Number one, looking at this map, it's not too surprising. John Hickenlooper and Donald Trump are not exactly unconventional candidates. The same map shows up time and time again in the beginning because the map is the same. I have seen so many comments about me saying that on my channel, a lot of my content is repetitive, and I get to an extent that it can be a little annoying seeing the same map time and time again, but don't blame me. Blame the American electorate. I get it. It could be a lot more interesting if I throw in a Nebraska safe Democrat, New York safe Republican call, but I'm not going to do that because that's not factually correct. Just because the map doesn't look interesting doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's just the same map, which does have some variation at time. It doesn't mean that I'm just recycling the same content. It really just means that the American electorate votes pretty much the same in a presidential election for different candidates running under the same party. It's almost as if that's, supposed to happen. But we're looking at an electoral map, obviously, that can be shifting in different ways. We look at states like Texas, Arizona, Georgia, states that previously weren't swing states and now are swing states. Sure, that's new. But they're probably still going to remain in the Republican column unless there's some weird candidate. And by weird, I don't mean that in a bad way, even though it does have a negative connotation. I guess you could say different candidate, someone like Beto O'Rourke, or even Joe Biden, based off the numbers that we've seen. Arizona's a tie, Joe Biden versus Trump, but Sanders loses it by 12. Texas is within 1% for Biden and O'Rourke versus Donald Trump. We go over to Georgia. Doesn't have much polling yet, but we should see some interesting results. South Carolina, only within 4%. In fact, actually, that brings up a good point. South Carolina, I have always been characterizing as safe states, even though in all reality, states like South Carolina and Kansas and Mississippi are probably going to be in the likely column in 2020. But regardless, again, it does not make that much of an impact. Both of these states are still going to remain in the Republican column, and it's not going to matter too much if I characterize it as 14% or 15%. But Hickenlooper, I do think he can do pretty well in Virginia. Almost every Democrat can. Up in the Northeast, we know Maine at large is probably going to remain in the Democratic column. Donald Trump is probably going to narrowly win in Maine's 1st district. That's the first lean call. I typically do not call lean calls right now, but again, we're just starting off on different points in the video. We're going to call this one early. Texas is going to be a likely state. Hickenlooper is not going to do too well in Texas. This is a state that also isn't too lenient on a number of candidates. Kamala Harris is behind by 8. Julian Castro is behind by 5. The only candidates that come close are O'Rourke, Sanders, and Biden and O'Rourke come the closest out of the Democratic bunch. And Hickenlooper, being completely honest with you, is not going to be able to drive out Latino voters in a state like Texas. Very few candidates can do that. Joe Biden can pretty much only do that mainly because he's appealing more to the whiter base, and Beto O'Rourke is appealing more to the Latino base. And also Texas has gotten closer in recent years, but still going to be a likely state. Keep in mind, likely ranges from 6 to 15%. Anywhere in between that, probably on the lower end, being completely honest with you. Going over to a state like Georgia, again, Hickenlooper, the stretch of his appeal is going to be really hard to push over into flipping a Republican state. Sure, Georgia is, a swing state, probably going to be a little bit closer than in 2016, but also maybe not. Hillary Clinton had that wonderful, I guess for her, name recognition in the South leading into the primaries, which means that all these Democratic voters stuck by here. However, when you're also looking at not just the Democratic primary, the general election, it was pretty close because Donald Trump wasn't liked by a number of these Republicans. Sure, Hillary Clinton possibly could have gotten a little bit more voters because she was a Clinton and a woman, but a number of factors go into this. But also Donald Trump was a main reason why he didn't win in some of those states by margins that he really should have. Now, going up to the Northeast, I would say Iowa and Ohio, you could both characterize as likely states. Again, in terms of African-American turnout and rural voters, I think Hickenlooper can do a pretty good job around the Sun Belt area, around the Rust Belt area, but not so much in areas like the South or states that were previously Donald Trump states. Nebraska's 2nd district will probably still be a lean margin for the Republican Party, but still a win regardless. And that puts Donald Trump at 205 electoral votes. Oh, I dropped my microphone. That's interesting. I still think it's plugged in, so we're going to continue. But looking at Hickenlooper's chances in a couple of other states, we know he's probably going to carry Minnesota. This state is already, number one, very anti-Trump based off what the numbers we're seeing now. And then going over to a couple of other states, Nevada, he's coming from the Sun Belt. That one's probably going to be a likely state for Hickenlooper, and not just on that reason alone, but just briefly going over a couple of these states. Arizona, I still see as a Republican state in the lean margin, not so much the tilt margin just yet, but still in the lean margin. Going over to Hickenlooper, number one, John Hickenlooper is not pretty well known. He's a pretty strong candidate if he was well known. He's not known for too much. He's just one of those different, more loved by both sides Democratic candidate, I guess. Someone like Joe Biden, who's perceived as bipartisan. I do think that's something that really could go for him when you're looking at a presidential election. But even then, he still isn't known nationwide. And, of course, if you do become the Democratic nominee, you will be known nationwide. So that's not really a factor. But if you're looking at the areas where he needs the voters, he's probably not going to flip states like Arizona or Texas. He just doesn't have that reputation. Sure, he will be known when the election time comes around, but he's probably not going to have enough to flip states like Iowa, Ohio, Georgia, Arizona, Texas at this point. But moving on from that, looking at some of these southern states, Donald Trump, per the usual, is probably going to win in North Carolina and Florida. Now, Florida, I'm going to actually move into the tilt column, which is pretty interesting. I usually don't characterize this one as a tilt. And the main reason being that state has voted with the Republican Party in recent elections as well. However, if you look at the margin, 0.4 down to 0.2%, that's very close. And Donald Trump, with this new electorate added in the state of Florida, that adds, I believe, around 2 million voters. That's going to be very impactful for the 2020 race, but I do think Donald Trump is going to narrowly edge that one out. For Hickenlooper, though, I do think he's going to narrowly win in the state of New Hampshire. I think Pennsylvania is going to be a narrow victory. Michigan is going to be a narrow victory. And Wisconsin, in fact, these states, they could move into the tote column. I'm going to move them into the tote column just for right now because I do think that they're going to get exceptionally close because Hickenlooper may not be the best candidate to appeal to the white working class at this point, but also almost every Democrat, I believe every Democrat actually beats Donald Trump in these Rust Belt states, and that's not a good sign considering his already bad numbers in 2016. So that wraps up today's video. John Hickenlooper announced his run for president. I would expect him to win 278 to 260. Again, I know I'm going to see comments about this. I guarantee it, but I know the map looks very repetitive, but pay attention to the margins. Number one, that's where you actually see the strengths and weaknesses in specific candidates. Yes, you can win those 3 Rust Belt states, but the margins really do matter, especially with an ever-changing map leading into 2020. And also, it's not my fault. I'm sorry that the map seems very repetitive, which is why I want you guys to give me ideas for different types of videos, but that's just how the electoral map is laid out itself for today. So again, thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.